For various known and also some unknown reasons, 1972 was a year of great change for Frank Zappa, musically and personally. Around January 8, 1972, after suffering serious injuries in a brutal attack at the Rainbow Theatre on December 10, 1971, he was able to leave the hospital in England and return home. His band had already returned to the States a nearly month earlier, around December 14, 1971. For Frank Zappa, it was definitely time to heal. And in Frank Zappa's case, healing is synonymous with music. And that is almost of spiritual significance, at least more so than physical, anatomical significance. His badly injured leg would have needed further treatment, but he refused. It was even not sure if he could ever play guitar again. He didn't want interviews, photos, or treatment. He wanted and needed time for his art, and crutches to get to the wheelchair. A recording studio was the only proper treatment room. The terrible attack at London's Rainbow Theatre took place on December 10, 1971, as mentioned before, and in the Zappa chronology on the incredibly fantastic website donlope.net, you can read that Zappa was already recording parts of songs on January 10, 1972, songs which later appeared on the posthumous release Funky Nothingness. He put together the album Las Mothers, just another band from LA, and released it in March 1972. This album was initially intended to be a double album. He experimented with electronic music, which is documented through Pumped and Waxed, a track that can be found on the album Finer Moments, compiled by Zappa but only released posthumously. It is interesting to note that Finer Moments includes tracks that can be attributed to the second unreleased LP of Just Another Band from LA. Wonderful. Even as a single LP release, Another Band from LA with Billy the Mountain is an outstanding album from the era of Flo and Eddie, the so-called vaudeville band. I don't know whether his former and now unemployed colleagues received a share of the sales. In an interview with the New Musical Express in 1976, Zappa said that he was sitting in a wheelchair and trying to get his former musicians a job and a record deal. What is certain is that Zappa's studio musicians in 1972 included Ian Underwood, Ainsley Dunbar, George Duke, Don Preston, and even Jeff Simmons, who a year earlier had caused a major and, thankfully, only short-lived shock by suddenly quitting his leading role in 200 Motels.
I could have been with Ringo. I mean, this takes some cojones to say, there goes the gear, lads, whatever. But his chauffeur ended up playing the part of Jeff, and he was damn good.
Happy Together with Mark Volman and Howard Kalin was just the title of a song in 1972. There was no happy togetherness between Zappa and those turtles. You can find interviews with the two of them in which they don't speak very highly of Zappa being their boss in the wheelchair era. But there are also interviews in which they describe Zappa as a great artist, saying that they sat at home waiting for the maestro to call and say that the vaudeville version of The Mothers would finally continue after the Rainbow Theatre attack, and they were looking forward to it with anticipation. But the only thing they suddenly learned was that Zappa was already in the studio with other musicians.
A place called the Rainbow Theatre in London, and you were knocked unconscious and pretty seriously injured. And I know you were in a wheelchair a long time after that. There's been a lot of talk about some of the things that happened to the Mothers as a result of that accident, but I'm wondering what, if anything, it did to you. Did it affect your thinking? Did it change any of your perspectives?
Oh, certainly, of course. It helps you to find out who your friends are.
It's definitely worth mentioning that in 1976, Frank Zappa booked Flo and Eddie as the opening act for his show, a performance beautifully captured on a 3-CD bootleg titled An Evening with Flo and Eddie, recorded on November 19, 1976. They also appeared as guest vocalists in Zappa's show that evening. In December 1976, Frank Zappa then appeared as a guest musician at a Flo and Eddie show at the Bottom Line in New York.
That's right. Yeah, much better. What's a group like you? Lace after midnight.
And there are audio recordings from 1987 circulating that prove Flo and Eddie were present during rehearsals for the Broadway The Hard Way tour. I don't know why they didn't go on tour with them. This shows Frank Zappa's forgiving side. Gail Zappa didn't like this side as much as he did.
Frank was very loyal to the people that had helped him along the way, even if they were the worst motherfuckers. He would go out of his way to help them. And I can count on one hand friends that he truly would spend time with. He was pretty forgiving for someone that he knew. But if he didn't know you, one chance, that's it, done.
Thank you.
But let's just move on now. Before I write a script for my videos, I jot down keywords on a piece of paper that come to mind and might be interesting for my story. When I write the story, I do extensive research to see if I can find verifiable background stories for these keywords. In this case, I reject artificial intelligence. Some viewers suspected that this was the case with my videos. It isn't. I only allow articles or books that were clearly written by humans, or recordings of interviews, audio or video, forums where several different people pursue the same idea, with links to whatever it may be. When it comes to my voice, which is ultimately a kind of sound, and merely reproduces notes that I previously wrote down by hand on paper, I don't see much difference between using an AI tool and Frank Zappa's use of a synclavier. He had his dots on paper, fed them into his synclavier, and chose, for example, clarinet, strings, drums, and/or burps for his specified composition. He also said,
human beings are expensive. If given the choice between not making music at all or making music in a medium that a person can afford, I will make music in a medium I can afford. Ergo, the machine.
I cannot afford a voice actor who would read my lyrics the way I want, here, in my small apartment. If you don't like that, then please just stop the video. Back to researching my texts. I remembered something that seemed important to me regarding the change that the terrible incident at the Rainbow Theater in December 1971 brought about for Frank Zappa, not only musically but also personally, his way of thinking and expressing it. I read somewhere that Frank Zappa once said that he was close to believing that the fire in Montreux on December 4th, 1971, was also a kind of punishment from God, with the serious injuries at the Rainbow Theater as the culmination of the punishment. Frank Zappa assumed that God was probably angry about his so-called sofa suite. Zappa's sofa suite is about Big G's creation of the world around a sofa that he saw floating in the emptiness of the universe, the creation of a magical pig that was then to be the star of a porn movie that Big G wanted to make. The female lead was to be Big G's short girlfriend, and the setting was the discovered and inspiring sofa. The only condition for the two main actors was that they do porn stuff and were not to stain the sofa in any way. Bad luck. The pig not only ejaculated the usual goo, but also fire, as we later learned in Stick It Out on Joe's Garage. Since I lost my own sources on this matter, and without them I could have been accused of talking nonsense, I went in search of further evidence. And indeed, I found an excellent text that confirms my memory of Zappa's thoughts on divine punishment. This article dates from 2009, is entitled Blasphemy and Upholstery, and was written by Clinton Morgan. Eternal gratitude to Clinton Morgan. The author researches the sofa suite, which he refers to as divan. As mentioned, he wrote the text in 2009, and later added that the release of various posthumous Zappa box sets had rendered his findings obsolete and irrelevant. But I don't agree with that at all. For me, Clinton Morgan's text remains recommendable and worth reading. He saved this important part of my story, because even if his assumptions about the composition of the allegedly blasphemous divan story have now been deciphered, it remains an important document about Frank Zappa's nature and his thinking. To me, it's as if the Sanzini brothers—
Ladies and gentlemen, the Sanzini brothers with the world-famous pyramid trick. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It took the Sanzinis years to perfect, years to inject. Let me tell you, here in San Francisco, the pyramid trick, I hope, will be retreated day and night with that same time and respect we give to Patrice Lumumba when he's in town. Olaf Sanzini, the oldest, is now forming the basis of the pyramid trick, the Hulk. That's right, we use it for a sound battle at Wally Hyder's. Okay, the pyramid trick? Yes, kids, it's about to begin.
jumped through a ring of fire at the turn of the year 71/72, ready for the circus, and a frog came out on the other side. A frog carrying a bag of sand, scattering the sand and growing a short forest from it. This is my visual interpretation of change. So here I'd like to explore an idea for which I've chosen a specific Zappa song. At first glance, the song seems merely surreal, somehow funny. As you may have already guessed, I'm talking about It Just Might Be a One-Shot Deal from the fantastic album Waka Jawaka, also known as Hot Rats 2, released in July 1972. Recording sessions with the band began in April 1972. Zappa's initial ideas for the tracks can therefore be safely dated to the time of his return from the hospital. The audio documentation, Joe's Domage, is particularly interesting in this context. This CD features the original working titles of the later composition The Grand Wazoo from the album of the same name. Remarkably, on Joe's Domage, this track was titled It Ain't Real, So What's the Deal? And Think It Over. Equally remarkable is that there are actually lyrics. Here's an excerpt. It will fall down. It will fall. Take it from me. Everything that gets in your way ain't real. It ain't real. So what's the deal? This kind of song text is light years away from lyrics like, what kind of girl do you think we are? Buana Dick, or even shove it right in. Here, someone has clearly turned away from a certain superficiality and turned inward. Something big has happened here. Philosophical, downright spiritual, I would say. And Frog Song, aka It Just Might Be a One-Shot Deal, can also be found among these original tracks, and thus has a closer connection to the concept of It Ain't Real, So What's the Deal? And Think It Over.
might have too many, since I never cared for sports. But I'm never really lonely in my eccentrical thoughts. There's always polar plankton. Him and me can play the blues. And then I'll watch him buff that tiny ruby that he used. He'll straighten up his turban and eject the little ooze along a one-celled Hammond organism underneath my shoe. And I'll call that's houses chill. Find out how the future is, cause that's where he's been. His little feet got long and flexible, and suckers fell right in. The time he crossed the line, later on the way back when.
My following analysis of It Just Might Be a One-Shot Deal is based on the books on science, art history, surrealism, symbolism, and the kind of stuff people tend to believe in, which I have studied throughout my life. I mean, well, I'm an autodidact. University of life, you know. The initial spark for my analysis is the knowledge that, following the devastating events, Zappa actually contemplated a kind of divine wrath as the cause of these misfortunes. Thanks again to Clinton Morgan at this point. The incredible transformation in Zappa's music and lyrics before and after the Rainbow Theater attack. Just as an aside, the song Eat That Question from the Grand Wazoo album from 1972 was originally titled Eat That Christian. The drawings you'll see in the background from now on were created by me over 20 years ago under my artist name, Andreas Rausch, a comic called possibly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for my private Frank Zappa collection. My comic is about dream interpretation, so there's a reason why the man in the suit looks like Sigmund Freud. In my comic, his name is Sigurd Freund, and please trust my dog's nose. I'll lead you down the right path. From where I take you, you can of course continue on your own, or turn back. I'm not some guru trying to send you on silly, expensive journeys.
I think gurus bite it.
Oh, and the German edition of Sigmund Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams features the Egyptian god Ra on the cover. Do you remember? John Williams' illustrations for Joe's Garage, Acts 1, 2, and 3. My video, As Above, So Below, and Elsewhere. Exactly that one. By the way, 1972 was the year where the first time some kind of alchemical, or better, Egyptian stuff showed up in the artwork of Zappa's albums. Just like at the wonderful back cover of The Grand Wazoo by the amazing Mr. Cal Schenkel. Anyway, here we go. Let's dream a little dream for me and you. The song, It Just Might Be a One-Shot Deal, has several narrators. First, there is Narrator 1, who is a dreamer. In my comic, this dreamer looks like Frank Zappa. The dreamer tells us about a dream in which a frog appears carrying a satchel. The dreamer seems to be kind of hypnotized. His account begins as a factual description of what he sees. His lips are not moving, so we are in his brain. Or better, subconsciousness. There a frog waddles down the hallway, reaches into its bag, and scatters an incredible amount of sand. And it keeps waddling down the hallway, scattering sand, and approaches the umbrella stand full of umbrellas standing there, while the dreamer sits or stands idly by and watches. Then there is Narrator 2. This narrator knows something about dream interpretation. That's my Sigmund Freud impersonator, Sigurd Freund.
Hello, my name is Sigurd Freund. You may know me from my publications on variations of dependency on one's own mother, household matters, and what pajamas can reveal about the subconscious. The main work of my research is titled Yo Mama, but today we will explore another of my areas of expertise, the space where the subconscious finds its forms of expression, that is, its language. In dreams. Now follow me into this revealing world of the inner soul. Separate reason from the nature of the seemingly familiar and embrace the seemingly unknown to understand your true self. This dreamer here has kindly made himself available to us for a practical examination and subsequent analysis.
The froggy come up with his satchel in his hand, then he reach in the front and dump a mile of sand. Across the rug, along the hall, up to the umbrella stand that you've been watching all the time.
Are you suddenly starting to worry that you might not be able to get out of this? Is your mind growing increasingly confused? Then please take the following to heart. You might get terribly scared if it feels too real, but throw yourself into it completely. Yes, throw yourself into it completely as long as it's happening, because it might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You might lose yourself, and you might wish to be found, but keep an eye on that frog. Whenever it hops by, you should watch
Just
it.
keep watching.
It could possibly be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
You want to be asking him and see if he's brought along a little bag for you. Ran.
And see if he's brought along a little bag for you.
In dream interpretation, the frog represents fear and a kind of wish to escape, but it also stands for major life changes and personal development if you overcome the fear. In dream interpretation, the sand scattered by the frog represents, among other things, time passing. This is neutral at first. In a negative sense, sand represents a lack of stability, like castles built of sand. Maybe later I listen to some Jimi Hendrix. In a positive sense, sand represents flexibility. That's pretty cool. And now we have this dream in which the frog moves directly toward the umbrella stand full of umbrellas. Now, that's good news. In dream interpretation, an umbrella represents a good omen, emotional security. It stands for protection from difficult situations and the opportunity to prepare for life events. The short forest that grows there and becomes denser and denser represents the unconscious, the hidden, and very often a phase of self-discovery in dream interpretation. This forest can be an indication that one should pause for a moment to look deeper into one's own psyche. Just as an aside, I've included the ruler, the toads of the short forest in the background of the picture. She has a snake as a pet, wears an amulet, and is breeding a dwarf. Anyway, Frank Zappa. He analyzes his real dream and realizes that there is something greater than the fear of a man-made big god who rules over the past and the future. There is the big note and no need to fear. The realizing of now. That's what sound is. It's the now. And parables are for Frank Zappa the best way to spread the word of this kind of awakening. The most important information in It Just Might Be a One-Shot Deal is without question the solo in the middle of the song. This instrumental part reveals the secret of the dream. It analyzes the words, their meaning. The parable morphs into uplifting notes. Frank Zappa loves parables. If you recall my video, As Above, So Below, and Elsewhere, I included Fulcanelli's remarks on the language of birds, also known as cant or slang. The alchemist Fulcanelli, to whom Frank Zappa dedicated a wonderful air sculpture, counted Jesus' parables among the language of birds, and also considered phonetic corruptions or even the left-out explanations of a story to be important for correctly understanding the meaning of a text. There is a great reference to Zappa's secret love for the language of birds on Civilization Phase 3. In the breathtaking track N Light, under the section He is Risen, there is the following note for an imaginary ballet. It reads, Jesus pops up in the middle of all this scenario like a baffled jack-in-the-box. The dancers attempt to worship him, but he casts them away. After examining the mess they have made of his parables, he disposes of them with a holy hand grenade and leaps into the piano. The solo in It Just Might Be a One-Shot Deal is a parable that goes beyond words and is about a special beauty that does you good. Isn't it just pure beauty? And who knows, maybe it also has been inside you, the listener, all along. The confusingly good meaning of the frog, the sand, the umbrellas, and the forest in your life. Incidentally, in dream interpretation, the rug represents a transitional phase, and the hall represents inner openness and the arrangement of feelings and thoughts, where maybe your personal frog shows up. Of course, only if you take the instrumental solo very seriously. So, be sure to watch the frog. Maybe it has a little bag of sand for you. And remember those lyrics from before, which later became musical notes. It will fall. Take it from me. Everything that gets in your way ain't real. It ain't real, so what's the deal? Think it over. Good night.